My brother publicly humiliated my teacher husband at family barbecue, got punched, then tried to frame him as abusive and get me divorced. I, 30F, never thought I'd be writing this, but after what happened at our family barbecue last weekend, I need to get this off my chest. My older brother Jake, 35M, has always been the golden child in our family. Our parents practically worship the ground he walks on, and he's used to getting away with anything he wants. I've dealt with his behavior my whole life, but this time he crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Growing up in Jake's shadow wasn't easy. From the moment I was born, it was clear who the favorite child was. Jake was a star athlete, got straight A's, and could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. He played football, baseball, and ran track, and our parents never missed a single game or meet. Meanwhile, I was part of the school band and debate team, but they rarely showed up to my performances or competitions. Jake got a brand new car for his 16th birthday. When my 16th birthday came around, I got a lecture about responsibility and was told I needed to save up for my own car. The favoritism was especially obvious when it came to education. When I struggled with math in high school, my parents hired tutors for Jake because he was already doing well and needed to maintain his GPA for college applications. When I asked for help, they told me I just needed to study harder. Jake got to apply to any college he wanted. I was told I had to go to the state school because it was cheaper, even though I had better grades than he did. I met my husband Mark, 32M, during my sophomore year of college. He was a junior studying education, and we met in a literature class we both took as an elective. He's everything Jake isn't: kind, supportive, and actually cares about other people's feelings. Mark noticed how I always sat alone in class and made an effort to talk to me. He asked about my interests, remembered little details about things I mentioned, and actually listened when I spoke. It was the first time in my life someone seemed genuinely interested in me as a person, not just as Jake's little sister. We've been married for 5 years now, and Jake has never approved of him. From the moment I introduced Mark to my family, Jake made it clear he thought I was settling. He constantly makes snide remarks about Mark's job as a high school teacher, saying things like how real men work in finance like he does. Every family gathering, Jake has to mention his salary or his bonuses or his latest luxury purchase, always with pointed looks in Mark's direction. My parents never say anything when Jake acts like this, they just laugh it off as him being protective of his little sister. The real issue is that Jake can't stand that I'm happy with Mark. He's been trying to sabotage our relationship from day one. When we got engaged, Jake told everyone at his own birthday party that Mark probably bought my ring from a pawn shop because that's all he could afford. At our wedding, Jake's toast was full of backhanded compliments about how brave I was for marrying for love instead of money. My parents thought it was hilarious. Last weekend was supposed to be a happy occasion. My parents hosted their annual summer barbecue, and everyone was there: aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. Jake showed up 3 hours late in his new Mercedes, making a big show of parking it right in front of the house so everyone could see it. He spent the first hour bragging about his recent promotion and how he was now managing a team of 20 people. I was helping Mom in the kitchen when I overheard Jake telling our cousins how Mark and I were struggling to buy a house because teachers make no money. He was going on about how we still lived in our starter apartment while he was about to build a pool in his backyard. This wasn't even true. We're actually closing on our dream home next month, we just haven't told the family yet because we wanted to wait until everything was finalized. When I confronted Jake about spreading lies, that's when things got ugly. He started loudly announcing to everyone how I was defending my loser husband who couldn't provide for me properly. He went on about how I could have married his friend Steve from college, who I went on exactly one date with, and lived in a mansion by now. He kept saying how Steve had just bought a vacation home in the Hamptons and how that could have been my life. Mark heard all this and calmly asked Jake to stop. Jake ignored him and kept going, saying how I was probably regretting my life choices and how Mark was dragging me down. He started telling everyone how Mark and I always skip expensive family vacations because we can't afford them, when the truth is we just prefer to spend our money on other things. Mark warned Jake one more time to stop disrespecting our marriage. Jake just laughed and asked what a high school teacher was going to do about it. That's when Jake made the biggest mistake. He started talking about how I probably couldn't even afford to have kids on Mark's salary, and how I was letting down the whole family by not giving our parents grandchildren yet. The truth is, we've been trying for a baby for 2 years and dealing with fertility issues, something only Mark knew about because I was too ashamed to tell my family. We've spent thousands on treatments, and each failed attempt has been heartbreaking. I started crying, and Mark lost it. He grabbed Jake by his designer shirt collar and told him if he ever spoke about me or our marriage again, he'd regret it. Jake tried to shove Mark, saying how he wasn't afraid of some poor teacher. Mark punched him square in the jaw. Jake fell back into the snack table, sending chips and dip flying everywhere. The whole barbecue erupted into chaos. My parents immediately jumped to Jake's defense, screaming at Mark to get out of their house. I tried to explain what Jake had said about our fertility struggles, but they didn't care. Mom was too busy fussing over Jake's bruised jaw while Dad called Mark a thug. Jake was playing it up, holding his jaw like he'd been hit by a professional boxer while Sarah ran around getting him ice packs. I left with Mark, and we haven't spoken to anyone since then. My phone has been blowing up with texts from family members. Half are saying Mark was out of line and should apologize, the other half are saying Jake had it coming. My parents want me to come stay with them until I figure out divorce proceedings because they claim Mark is clearly violent and dangerous. Jake's wife Sarah is threatening to press charges for assault. She keeps texting me about how traumatized their kids are after seeing their uncle act like a criminal. I don't regret standing by Mark. He defended me when no one else would, like he always has. He's the only person who has ever put me first, who has ever stood up to Jake's bullying. But now I'm worried this incident is going to tear my family apart. Even relatives who usually stay out of the drama are taking sides. Update 1, the situation has gotten so much worse since the barbecue incident, and I need to vent about everything that's happened. For the past 2 weeks, I've been dealing with nonstop harassment from my family, but yesterday things reached a new low. I was at work, in the middle of an important meeting with clients, when my parents showed up unannounced at my office. They had divorce papers in hand and were demanding to see me immediately. My dad was shouting in the lobby about how he needed to save his daughter from an abusive marriage, while my mom was telling anyone who would listen that my husband was dangerous and violent. They had already contacted their lawyer friend, someone who apparently owed my dad a favor, and were ready to start divorce proceedings right away. My boss had to pause the meeting because of all the commotion. When I went out to see what was happening, my mom tried to physically drag me out of the office, saying I needed to come home with them where I'd be safe. They caused such a scene that my boss had to threaten to call security before they would leave. I was mortified. I've worked at this company for 5 years, built a solid reputation, and in just 15 minutes, my parents managed to make me look completely unprofessional. After they left, my boss called me into his office. He was surprisingly understanding about the situation, but he warned me that I needed to handle my personal issues outside of work. Some of my coworkers are now treating me differently. I've caught them whispering and giving me concerned looks, probably wondering if I'm really in an abusive relationship. What really gets me is how my family is completely ignoring Jake's role in all this. Last night, I tried calling my mom to talk about what Jake had said at the barbecue. I explained how he's been verbally abusive toward me and Mark for years, how he constantly puts down Mark's career and makes snide comments about our marriage. Mom's response? She said I need to stop being so sensitive and that Jake is just looking out for me because he loves me. When I brought up how Jake had mocked our fertility struggles, she actually said that if we could afford a house, we could afford fertility treatments, so clearly Jake was right about our financial situation. Dad was even worse. He called me this morning and went on this long rant about how Jake has always been the responsible one and how I'm throwing away my relationship with my only brother over some hurt feelings. He kept saying how Jake has a successful career and a beautiful family, so clearly, he knows what he's talking about when it comes to marriage and relationships. The fact that Jake has been spreading lies about us doesn't seem to matter to them at all. The most shocking part? I found out through my cousin that Jake has been telling everyone in the extended family that Mark has a history of violence. He's completely twisted the barbecue incident, telling people that Mark attacked him unprovoked because Jake was trying to have a private conversation with me about my unhappy marriage. He's saying that Mark is isolating me from the family and that he's worried I might be in danger. Some of my relatives are now claiming they've always noticed red flags with Mark. My Aunt Linda said she always thought it was suspicious that Mark comes to every family event with me, saying that abusive men often don't let their wives go places alone. This is completely ridiculous. I prefer having Mark with me at family gatherings because he supports me and helps me deal with Jake's constant bullying. But now everything is being reframed to make Mark look controlling and dangerous. Last night, Sarah, Jake's wife, called me. At first, I thought maybe she was reaching out to make peace. She's usually the reasonable one in their relationship. Instead, she spent 20 minutes berating me about how I'm tearing the family apart by defending Mark. She demanded that I convince Mark to make a public apology to Jake, suggesting he should post it on social media so everyone can see it. She said Jake's jaw is still bruised, and their kids are traumatized from seeing their uncle act like a violent criminal. When I refused to ask Mark to apologize, Sarah revealed that they're planning to file a police report about the assault. She said they have witnesses who will back up their version of events. Apparently, some of our cousins have agreed to say that Mark attacked Jake without provocation. She even threatened that if we don't handle this their way, Jake would make sure Mark loses his teaching job over this incident. I'm honestly stunned by how quickly my family has turned us around to make Mark the villain. They're completely rewriting history to paint Jake as the victim, just like they've done my entire life. Every time Jake has done something wrong, my family has found a way to excuse his behavior and blame someone else. But this time, they're not just excusing him, they're actively helping him spread lies about my husband. My Aunt Rita had the nerve to tell me that if I stay with Mark, I won't be welcome at future family gatherings because everyone will feel unsafe. The same people who have watched Jake verbally abuse me for years are now claiming they're afraid of Mark because he finally stood up to Jake's bullying. The hypocrisy is astounding. Mark is trying to stay strong through all of this, but I can see how much it's affecting him. He's worried about losing his job if Jake follows through with his threats. He's worried about me having to deal with all this family drama. He even offered to make a public apology to Jake just to make this all go away, but I refused. I won't let my family force my husband to apologize for defending me, especially when Jake is the one who should be apologizing. Update 2. A lot has happened since my last update, and the truth about Jake has finally started coming out. After weeks of threats and harassment, Jake actually went through with filing a police report against Mark. But his plan completely backfired in a way none of us expected. Remember those cousins who were supposedly going to back up Jake's version of events? Well, when the police actually interviewed them, they told the truth instead. My cousins Pete and Amy confirmed that Mark had acted in self-defense after Jake's prolonged verbal abuse and that Jake had been the one who got physical first. They also told the police about Jake's behavior at the barbecue, including his comments about our fertility struggles. But that wasn't all. Once Pete and Amy started talking, they couldn't stop. They revealed some really disturbing things about Jake that I hadn't even known about. Apparently, Jake has been badmouthing me to the entire family for years, way longer than I realized. He told everyone that I only got into college because he helped me cheat on my SATs. This was completely false. I actually scored higher than he did, which was something our parents never acknowledged. He's also been spreading vicious rumors about our finances. He told the family that Mark and I are in massive debt and that I've been secretly asking Jake for loans behind Mark's back. According to Amy, Jake showed up at our last family reunion bragging about how he had to bail us out of credit card debt. This never happened. We've never asked Jake for money and never would. He even told our younger cousins not to look up to me because I settled for a mediocre life by marrying a teacher instead of pursuing a real career. The biggest revelation came from my cousin Amy. After everything came out with the police report, she finally showed me some texts from Jake that she'd been holding on to. In these messages, Jake admitted that he's always been jealous that I found a happy marriage while his is falling apart. It turns out that Sarah caught him cheating multiple times over the past few years but stayed quiet about it because she's afraid of losing her lifestyle. All those times Jake criticized Mark's salary? He was just projecting his own insecurities about his marriage onto us. When the police dropped the case against Mark due to lack of evidence and witness statements supporting self-defense, Jake completely lost it. His perfect image was cracking, and he couldn't handle it. He sent me a series of angry messages late at night, probably after drinking. He blamed me for ruining his reputation in the family and said I was dead to him. He threatened to make sure our parents never spoke to me again and said he would make me regret choosing Mark over family loyalty. The messages were so threatening that Mark and I had to file for a restraining order. We took screenshots of everything and sent them to our lawyer. When we presented the evidence in court, Jake tried to claim his phone had been hacked and someone else had sent those messages. The judge didn't buy it, especially after seeing the police report about the barbecue incident. Sarah reached out to me privately after the restraining order was granted. She finally admitted that Jake has anger issues and that their marriage has been struggling for years. She apologized for backing up his lies about Mark and admitted she only did it because Jake threatened to expose her own secrets if she didn't support his story. I feel bad for her, but at the same time, she chose to help Jake spread lies about my husband that could have ruined his career. The most surprising part of all this has been watching Jake's carefully constructed image fall apart. All those years of presenting himself as the successful, perfect son, all those times he looked down on my marriage and Mark's career, it was all a facade. Behind the expensive car and designer clothes is a deeply unhappy man who tried to tear down my marriage because he couldn't stand seeing someone else's happiness. My parents are still in denial about all of this, of course. When confronted with the evidence of Jake's lies and the threatening messages, they claimed I must have provoked him somehow. They're still saying Mark is the problem and that none of this would have happened if I had just married someone from our social circle like they wanted. It's like they live in an alternate reality where Jake can do no wrong, no matter how much evidence they see to the contrary. Update 3. This will be my final update. After careful consideration and recent events, I've made the difficult decision to go no contact with my entire family. The past 2 months have been a roller coaster of emotions and revelations that have finally shown me who my family really is. Last week was a breaking point. Mom called to tell me that Jake and Sarah are getting divorced because his affairs became public knowledge. Instead of acknowledging Jake's responsibility in destroying his own marriage, she somehow found a way to blame me. According to her, Jake has been under so much stress because of the restraining order and family drama that he had to seek comfort elsewhere. She actually suggested that if I dropped the restraining order and apologized to Jake, maybe his marriage could be saved. When I pointed out how ridiculous this was, Mom went on a tirade about family loyalty. She said I was being selfish for not considering how this situation was affecting Jake's children, completely ignoring how Jake's actions led to this outcome. Then she had the audacity to suggest that this whole mess started because Mark punched Jake, still refusing to acknowledge the years of verbal abuse that led to that moment. Dad was even worse. He showed up at our new house unannounced, demanding that I sign a notarized letter stating that Mark had a history of violent behavior. He claimed this would help Jake in his divorce proceedings with Sarah. When I refused, he threatened to cut me out of their will and said I was no longer their daughter. It was the last straw. I realized they would never see Jake for who he really is. The extended family has split into 2 camps. Most of them are still enabling Jake's behavior, sending me guilt-tripping messages about how family should stick together no matter what. My Aunt Karen even started a family prayer group to pray for my soul because I chose my husband over my brother. The level of manipulation is astounding. Mark and I moved into our new house last month, and it's become our sanctuary. We changed our phone numbers, blocked everyone on social media, and started fresh. The only family members I still talk to are my cousins Amy and Pete, who stood by us through everything. They've been disowned by the family too for telling the truth about Jake, but we formed our own little support system. We have weekly dinners together and they've become more like siblings to me than Jake ever was. Sarah reached out one last time before finalizing her divorce. She apologized again for her role in spreading lies about Mark and offered to make a public statement clearing his name. While I appreciated the gesture, I told her it wasn't necessary. We're done engaging with the drama and have no interest in revisiting the past. Some might think I'm being harsh by cutting off my entire family, but for the first time in my life, I feel at peace. I no longer have to deal with Jake's constant put-downs, my parents' endless disappointment, or the family's toxic dynamics. Mark and I are focusing on our life together, continuing our fertility treatments without the added stress of family drama, and building the future we want. Looking back, I realize that my family never really accepted me for who I am. They always wanted me to fit into their mold, marry who they chose, live how they wanted, and most importantly, never question Jake's behavior. Breaking free from their control has been liberating. Our new home is filled with love, respect, and support, everything my family's house never was. To everyone who supported us through this nightmare, thank you. Your comments and messages help me see that I'm not crazy for choosing my marriage over a toxic family dynamic. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the one you're born into. Mark and I are happier than ever, and we're excited about building our future together, surrounded by people who genuinely love and support us.